What is going on, Kane Sport? Izubee Charles, joined by Stephen Wagner for another Inside Canes Recruiting podcast. Stephen, has been a busy few weeks down there in Coral Gables with spring practice rolling along, which means a ton of big time prospects rolling down in South Florida, checking out what the Miami Hurricanes have to offer. We're coming off a big commitment this past weekend as Javen Mallerie, the four-star running back from West Boca, announced his pledge to the Canes over schools like Notre Dame, Clemson, and Florida. Steven, that was a huge commitment for the Canes. I know a lot of people thought this recruitment could have gone a lot of different ways, but he ultimately stays home and lands in South Florida, stays with Miami Hurricanes. Just what are your quick thoughts? I know we talked about this a little bit before. Just what are your quick thoughts on Miami land and Javen Mallerie?
Big, thick power back who really loves to get north and south. Does not dance around, loves contact, wants to run through your face. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Mark Fletcher, maybe not as smooth as a runner right now at this point in his career. Maybe doesn't quite have the same top end speed, but kind of deceptively fast whenever you look at how big he is. Runs very hard, hits the hole quickly, but also can find that balance between hitting the hole quickly when you need to, but also allowing your backs to set up block or allowing your offensive linemen to set up blocks before you really attack and you really try to get downhill. I think this is a very good pickup for Miami. It's another one of those South Florida guys who falls right in Miami's pipeline and a dude that you really expect the Hurricanes to get. Right now, he's listed as a 4-star by 3 out of the 4 recruiting databases. I think there's a great chance he's going to end up as a consensus 4-star, top 300 recruit in both the on 300 and the industry ranking. Definitely a very good pickup for Miami, and one of those guys that they kind of knew at the beginning of the year, if he committed, they would absolutely take that commitment from him. Guy who, basically, I mean, he liked Miami. Miami liked him, and that's really all it came down to. I mean, it really doesn't need to be overcomplicated sometimes. Sometimes it really just comes down to, a kid wants to be at Miami and Miami wants a kid to be there. And so it just works out perfectly. And I think that's exactly what happened now.
Yeah, with Javen Mallerie, always talk to him and say, hey, what stands out about Miami too? He's always told Steve and I, hey, love who loves you. He says he wakes up from a text with Coach Mario Cristobal. He goes to sleep with a text from Coach Mario Cristobal. So the Canes have been all in on Javen Mallerie for quite some time now, and we're seeing that hard work paying off from the Canes side, landing that 4-star prospect. And Steve, we talked about this at length, on a variety of shows that Miami's looking to take 2 running backs in this class, and with Javen on the board, that kind of starts a time ticking clock for who could be next, with that second slot in that 2026 class for the Miami Hurricanes. Without giving too much away, I know there are a few running backs on campus this weekend, and there have been a handful of running backs that have visited throughout the spring. Just kind of what are your thoughts on this, second slot that the Miami Hurricanes are trying to fill on that running back board in the 2026 class?
Yeah, Tre'Davious Ball is obviously kind of, the dream get for Miami. That is their swing for the fences, kind of best case scenario dude that they would absolutely love to get. Kind of think it might be, you would have thought it probably would have been a little bit of a pipe dream at the beginning of the year, just because, it seemed like he'd been pretty solid to Oregon. Miami did get him down for a game day visit last year, but, the Hurricanes now were able to get him down for an unofficial spring visit over the weekend, and from what we were able to tell, it did go pretty well. Now Miami, Tre'Davious himself wasn't really willing to talk or speak with media. Kind of wasn't really feeling up for it. But asking around, with some different people, it did seem like the visit did go pretty well. It seems like the Hurricanes have a decent amount of confidence that they are going to be able to make a little bit of a run at him. Now, obviously, they need to get him down for an official visit next. That definitely is the next big step. And I don't know if I would consider Miami a serious player if they're not able to get him for an official visit, but they're definitely giving themselves a chance. And he is interested enough that he at least wanted to come down and check it out. So Tre'Davious Ball, maybe a little bit of a pipe dream, but someone that, I think Miami could end up having an okay chance with. Some other backs right now, you also look at guys like Javian Osborne, that running back from Texas. You look at Henry Ollinger up in Pennsylvania. You look at Jamal Rule, who came down to Miami this past weekend. There are definitely some dudes that the Hurricanes are going to have a chance with. They're getting a ton of backs on campus this spring. Can't forget about Derek Cooper either, the local star at Chaminade Madonna. They're going to get a ton of different dudes on campus this spring. Miami's just going to need to keep chipping away at a lot of these guys, including Tre'Davious Ball, who right now I think is going to kind of be the most challenging because of that commitment to Oregon. And we have seen before, Dan Lanning makes it pretty hard to flip guys away. The only really, really major instance that I can think of in recent history is or of a recruit suddenly leaving Oregon was Dallas Wilson deciding to flip from Oregon to Florida last year, and that was kind of an instance where there were sort of some outside factors that were playing into that, but. Still, you definitely don't see a ton of guys get away from Oregon, but Miami's definitely going to shoot their shot.
100%. And like you mentioned, Trady Bill made his way to Miami last year for a game day visit and was back on campus, this past weekend, checking out, all the things that Miami has to offer. And, you can kind of tell when, visits go good and visits go bad when kids are living campus. Obviously, we didn't have the chance to talk with him, but, looked pretty happy. Looked like he enjoyed his time with Coach Matt Merritt, walked him out and all that good stuff. And another name I want to kind of throw in that mix is favorite Ike from Georgetown, Ohio. He's going to be down there in Coral Gables on Tuesday checking out Miami for the first time. Ohio State got a few, predictions for him after he recently got the offer from the Buckeyes. But that's another guy on the Miami Hurricanes running back board that we're keeping an eye on. And there are going to be a ton of names that we're going to look to potentially fill that number 2 spot, which, I think is going to be very intriguing. Kind of a storyline to watch as we get through the spring and head into the summer. But enough of this running back talk. Let's talk about the big boys that were down there on campus in Miami this past week. And there are plenty of them, starting with the number 1 defensive lineman in that 2026 class, James Johnson of Miami Northwestern. Recently made the move from my hometown of Fort Myers to Miami, playing with Coach Teddy Bridgewater and those guys down there at the West. Steven, you caught up with On3's number 1 defensive lineman in the 2026 class, who's going to have a busy, busy spring. Made sure to make a stop down there in Coral Gables, to meet, new defensive line coach Damian Lewis and some of those new defensive coaches. Just what were your thoughts about James Johnson visiting Miami? Kind of what was he saying after he left Coral Gables?
Yeah, it definitely feels good about the Hurricanes. I do think Miami's in a good spot. I do think they are a very serious player. But right now, it does kind of seem like Georgia is still that team to beat for James. Now, that being said, I absolutely think Miami is going to have a great chance to close that gap, especially now that he's going to be playing at Northwestern, a school that historically has been one of those pipeline schools to Miami, right there in the Hurricanes' backyard. He'll have a ton of opportunities to visit Coral Gables. I mean, really anytime. Staff will be able to very easily visit a ton of his games, watch him play multiple times this fall if they want to. I do think it's going to give Miami a little bit of a better shot, maybe. But I do think that his interest in Georgia has been, so well established now that it does feel like there is maybe a little bit of a gap between Georgia and the rest of the pack. Although, we have seen before, gap can be closed in a hurry.
Yeah, Miami just going to continue to chip away on James Johnson, who I said is On3's number 1 defensive lineman in that 2026 class. And we know how precious defensive linemen, when it comes to recruiting those guys are. So Miami's going to put all those chips, towards James Johnson, see if they can, keep one of the Sunshine State's best players home. And, sticking with the theme of prospects from my hometown of Fort Myers, I always got to give a shout out to those guys. Joel Irvin, a big-time offensive lineman from Fort Myers High School, recently committed to Louisville, but Miami's all in on him. Recently spent time there in Coral Gables with Coach Mirabal, Coach Cristobal on Saturday. Coach Mirabal walked him out with his family and, had the chance to speak with him. He said this visit exceeded his expectations and made a really, really big impact. Coach Mirabal and those guys are really, really high on Joel. He's not the highest ranked guy, but you just look at him, he's absolutely massive. When we went to go shake his hand after the visit, I made the joke, it was like a grown man holding a baby's hand, and my hand was a baby's hand. He was just like, absolutely massive prospect. And, a guy that, obviously committed to Louisville, but he said the Hurricanes are approaching things respectively, and he's hoping to get down once again before his official visit on June 13th. So he's a guy in that offensive line room that I'm watching, and, Coach Mirabal and those guys has a lot of great things to say about him. And, he's just another prospect in state that we're monitoring now down there on campus. And Stephen, obviously a guy that's committed to Louisville. Just what are your thoughts about Miami kind of chipping away at another in-state guy who isn't the highest ranked, but obviously Coach Mirabal and Coach Cristobal see something in Joel Irvin.
Yeah, whenever it comes to offensive line recruiting, especially with Mirabal and Cristobal, they are such elite offensive line evaluators. They really do evaluate the offensive line position as well as, if not better than, anyone in the country. So I kind of, look away from rankings whenever coaches are going after a player because you can see Miami really prioritize a guy like Joel Irvin or maybe a Ryan Moret, who isn't exceptionally highly ranked. But then on the other hand, they have a guy like Darius Gray, who came down to Miami with his California Power 5-on-5 team a few weeks ago, who Miami really hasn't been very interested in at all. It tells me that these guys who are proven evaluators see something in these prospects that I just do not see and I do not get. And a lot of the time, if I was, if I was a fan and I was looking at someone that my team is or isn't recruiting, I'd say, man, you guys are idiots. Why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? That kind of stuff. But given the success rate that this staff has with offensive linemen, going back to whenever they were at Oregon and heck, even going back to whenever they were at FIU, they had some pretty decent offensive lines at FIU too. I kind of have to, tip my hat to them and say, maybe you do know something I don't. I'm going to have faith in you.
Yeah, I feel like that's a great example of what you just said. Or, Darius Gray coming in, the number 2 interior offensive lineman in the country. He's a guy that said, hey, maybe if, Miami prioritized me a little bit more, I would kind of, take them serious. Obviously, Miami's not really pushing for Darius Gray. But like you mentioned, a guy like Ryan Rep, who's ranked in the 500, a guy like Joel Irvin, who's ranked in the 600. You see him saying, Miami's texting me every day. Ryan Moret's made multiple, visits down there at Coral Gables. So, that's why Coach Mirabal, Coach Cristobal get paid the big bucks to evaluate these offensive linemen. And they've done a great job, of doing so over the past few years. And another guy that kind of comes to mind is Ines Cooper, was ranked, I believe, in the 400s or 500s, coming out of high school. Not a guy.
That kid was like over 1,000.
Yeah.
He was way up there. He has admitted to being overweight, not in good shape, not in football shape whenever he came out of high school. Miami had to chip away at him.
Yeah, that was another one. And he's been starting since, halfway through his freshman year. So, hey, when it comes to offensive line, like Steven said, I'm not batting guy when it comes to guys Coach Mirabal, Coach Cristobal are prioritizing. But Joel Irvin is a guy that, they really like in that 2026 cycle. And, make sure to check out that story that we have up after his visit to Miami this Saturday. And kind of want to lead it to next weekend. Steven, we've been kind of talking about this throughout the spring of how big a weekend it's going to be. Usually Miami has this big pool party at the end of July, but as we all know, July is going to be a complete dead period. So this is going to be Miami's big kind of summer splash weekend where they take the kids out to the pool, have a big barbecue. Steven, just obviously we have a week away to go from the big pool day. But just what are your thoughts about this big weekend coming up in Miami?
This is basically going to be the equivalent of that big end of summer recruiting cookout that they usually have, because this year they're not going to be able to host visitors at all during the month of July. The entire month is going to be a dead period for recruiting. So, there won't be a ton that's actually happening on Miami's physical campus. So this Saturday is going to have to be whenever they roll out the red carpet and they get everyone down. We've had kind of a running list going in the message board. I'll just read off some of these names here. Top 50 edge, Jake Krell. 4-star athlete Hezzy Kent, 4-star cornerback John Tavius Wyman, who's a Georgia commit. He was just on campus earlier this week. 4-star safety Cortez Redding, another big name prospect. 4-star offensive tackle Sam Greer. 4-star interior offensive lineman Brett Collegiate, 4-star interior offensive lineman Janari Carr, 4-star cornerback Jordan Crutchfield, 4-star receiver Corey Barber, 4-star cornerback Brody Jennings. I mean, man, the list goes on and on and on, and I still don't think we've confirmed even half the names that are ultimately going to end up coming down to Coral Gables. A ton of huge Miami priorities. Basically, the way you can look at this is, if you get invited to this pool party, you are a someone. They are only inviting someones to this pool party. Like everyone there is going to be a significant recruit that the staff cares about and that the staff would like to land. Very similar to what they've done in years past, although obviously this will just come after a scrimmage because they are going to scrimmage next Saturday before they put their recruiting hats on. I'm anticipating being down there all day, well into the night. Absolutely huge recruiting day. Man, we'll probably have anywhere from 15 to 20 stories coming out of that weekend. That is going to be definitely the biggest single recruiting day that they're going to have on campus this spring.
Yeah, going to be absolutely massive. And, like Steven said, going to be a ton of content coming out from our end at canesport.com. And make sure to stay tuned with all that and the stuff that we wrote this past weekend. And as we continue to add names on the message board, make sure to stay tuned on that. If you like this video, leave a big thumbs up and join the discussions as we talk recruiting and much more from the Miami Hurricanes at canesport.com. So for Steven Wagner, I'm Izubee Charles. Thank you all for watching. Have a great rest of your day.